The Boogeyman had spent years trying to forget the world of shadows he once inhabited. Retired and anonymous, he'd settled into an unremarkable cabin on the edge of civilization, finding a semblance of peace he hadn't thought possible. His dog, an aging yet spirited companion with a keen instinct for danger, was his closest friend, the only being left who understood his buried pain and constant search for peace. The dog was not just a pet. He was a symbol, a faithful reminder of the world's kindness amidst the cruelty. One starless night, the Boogeyman and his dog sat on the cabin's porch. A quiet breeze stirred the trees, and his dog's ears perked, detecting something unusual. Following the dog's gaze, the Boogeyman spotted a strange glimmer above the horizon, hovering like a storm waiting to break. His instincts sharpened, and unease prickled at his senses. The air carried a hum, faint and distant but unmistakably foreign. The Boogeyman stood still, one hand on the dog's back, eyes scanning the woods as his pulse quickened. He didn't know it then, but the peace he'd fought to protect was about to be shattered. As midnight passed, a low, thrumming sound grew louder, and with it the air thickened. Out of nowhere, brilliant beams of light sliced through the dark, illuminating his cabin in an eerie glow. His dog growled, alert and tense, teeth bared. The Boogeyman instinctively crouched, preparing for a threat he couldn't yet see. Emerging from the shadows, armored figures appeared, tall, imposing aliens armed with strange, humming weapons, their eyes cold and devoid of humanity. They moved with calculated, predatory intent, like hunters closing in on prey. His dog let out a bark, loud and defiant, as if sensing the impending violence. Before he could react, the aliens advanced, weapons raised, their voices a chilling blend of guttural commands and clicks. The Boogeyman moved to shield his dog, but one alien fired a blast that lit up the night. He was thrown back, pain searing through his body as the shockwave hit him, disorienting his senses. In that instant, he heard his dog yelp, a small, pained sound that pierced deeper than any physical wound. The Boogeyman reached out, desperation in his eyes, but the dog lay motionless, life extinguished in an instant. As he lay there, the world blurred around him, but one thought took root. His dog was gone, taken from him by creatures who viewed life as disposable. His mind replayed the sight of the aliens' blank, unfeeling expressions, the cold efficiency with which they'd executed the one being he held dear. Grief consumed him, heavy and dark. But within that grief simmered something even more potent, a rage as deep as the emptiness left behind. The aliens soon retreated, their mission complete, disappearing back into night as if nothing had happened. The Boogeyman remained where he'd fallen, hand reaching out to his loyal friend, the last fragment of the life he had fought so hard to protect. His vision cleared and the reality settled in. They had taken his peace, but they had no idea of the price they would pay. With a determination that was nearly elemental, he rose, his mind calculating his next steps. He knew what he would do, who he would become again. The quiet man who had disappeared into the shadows of retirement was no more. The Boogeyman was reborn, purpose ignited by a fire that could only be quenched in blood. He turned back to his cabin, each step deliberate. Inside, he prepared, retrieving the hidden arsenal he had once vowed never to use again. Old instincts reawakened. A lifetime of skills honed in darkness resurfaced with startling clarity. These invaders had made a fatal error. They had provoked a man whose fury had no limits and whose resolve could outlast even the stars. His grief transmuted into resolve as he remembered the cold look in the aliens' eyes. These creatures from beyond had come to Earth to sow chaos, to impose their will without care or consequence. But they had not expected a reckoning, had not imagined that the simple act of taking a life would bring down the wrath of a man who had mastered death itself. In the stillness of his cabin, the Boogeyman made a silent vow, one that would be fulfilled with every step of his coming path. He took a final look at the empty porch, a place that had once meant peace, now haunted by the memory of his lost friend. There would be no forgiveness, no negotiation. He would hunt these invaders, track them across the stars if he had to, and make each of them understand the price of crossing him. With that final thought, he left the cabin behind, stepping into the night with purpose, a figure cloaked in vengeance and grief. The hunt had begun, and somewhere in the galaxy, the alien who had led this assault, the alien prince, remained blissfully unaware that a storm was coming, and it wore the face of humanity's darkest legend. The Boogeyman's quiet world had been burned to ashes. Now, in its place, a singular purpose smoldered: vengeance. With his loyal companion gone, he devoted himself to tracking the beings responsible, creatures that had underestimated both the resolve and reach of their prey. The hunt began. He returned to the site of the attack, a once peaceful clearing now scarred with alien footprints and the smoldering remains of foreign tech. Embedded in the earth were shards of alien metal, torn scraps of what must have been a vehicle or weapon, left behind as the attackers retreated. The Boogeyman crouched, studying each fragment. He picked up a piece of glistening metal that pulsed faintly with an otherworldly energy, unlike anything he'd encountered. It was clear these aliens had come equipped for conquest, wielding technology designed to subjugate without mercy. But in his hands, their tools would become their undoing. He worked through the night, dismantling, examining, and piecing together what little he could understand of their weaponry. His experience as a former assassin served him well. He could see how these weapons were constructed for efficiency, designed for warriors with greater strength and resilience than any human. But he had something they lacked: a personal vendetta fueled by grief and the cunning to bend their technology to his will. As dawn crept over the horizon, he had repurposed a plasma device into a makeshift weapon, its charge unstable but lethal. It was the first of many new tools he would adapt for his mission. The next step required intelligence beyond his secluded world. He contacted a few shadowy figures from his past, allies who had once operated in the darkest corners of society, traffickers of information and technology with no allegiance to Earth's governments. They owed him for past favors, and though wary, they reluctantly shared what little they knew of recent extraterrestrial activity. The aliens, as it turned out, were part of a warrior caste from a distant empire, notorious for scouring planets, seeking resources and dominance. And at the helm of this recent incursion was the alien prince himself, a ruthless strategist who relished in conquest. Armed with the knowledge of his enemy, the Boogeyman now had a target. The prince's presence on Earth had been an insult, a sign of arrogance that he would pay for in kind. The prince was not invincible. Every leader had weaknesses. He studied the intel meticulously, mapping out where the alien forces had landed and where they might have established a base. Each clue painted a clearer picture of the enemy's reach and their tactical advantages. They were powerful, but overconfident, assuming humanity had no means to retaliate. The Boogeyman spent days honing his tactics, adapting his arsenal to exploit their physical and technological weaknesses. He pushed his body to its limits, training as he hadn't in years, conditioning himself for battles that would demand precision, speed, and unyielding resilience. The alien warriors possessed superior strength and resilience, but he had an edge they lacked. He was unpredictable, a human weapon forged in shadows and tempered by loss. Then came the time for him to test his resolve. Following the network of alien signals, he traced them to a remote outpost they had established, hidden from the untrained eye but glaringly obvious to a hunter like him. Using his knowledge of their movements, he laid traps in the dense forest surrounding the outpost, turning the terrain into a death trap. His patience was relentless as he waited, watching as the alien patrols entered his territory one by one, only to be met with traps and ambushes. The Boogeyman dispatched them with ruthless efficiency, using both alien technology and his own lethal skill. Each skirmish left fewer soldiers to defend the prince and rattled the aliens' confidence. Word of his attacks spread among their ranks, and fear began to chip away at their arrogant resolve. To them, he was a phantom, striking without warning, his tactics a lethal puzzle they could not solve. Every alien that fell brought him closer to his ultimate target, a systematic breakdown of their defenses, unraveling the Empire's invincibility thread by thread. On the eve of his assault on the prince's stronghold, he took a moment to reflect. He had become a weapon once more, honed and prepared to bring down the being responsible for his suffering. Each step had served to remind him of his purpose, each encounter a grim testament to the force that grief and vengeance could become when wielded with purpose. He knew that he could never restore what he'd lost, but in his quest to honor his fallen companion, he would leave a mark on these invaders, a scar they would never forget. As he observed the stronghold from his concealed position, his heart was calm, his mind focused. Tomorrow, he would strike at the heart of their empire's arrogance. And with the prince's downfall, he would send a clear message. Earth was not a conquest waiting to be claimed, and humanity was far from defenseless. The Boogeyman moved like a shadow through the dense undergrowth, his eyes fixed on the alien outpost nestled within a cluster of alien ships and machinery. Each structure pulsed with an eerie light, casting an otherworldly glow across the forest floor. Alien soldiers patrolled the perimeter, armored and equipped with weapons meant to instill fear, their movements precise and synchronized. But they did not know he was there, watching, studying, preparing for their downfall. He waited until darkness fell fully, a time when his skills and patience would work to his advantage. In the silence, he positioned himself closer, methodically observing each soldier's patterns, calculating the exact timing of their movements and communications. Every detail counted. These soldiers, disciplined and armed with alien technology, operated under the assumption that they were untouchable. The Boogeyman intended to disprove that notion with finality. The first guard barely had time to breathe before he was gone. The Boogeyman struck with a lethal precision, his hands silent and unyielding. The guard slumped without a sound, his body hidden quickly among the roots and shadows. One by one, he thinned their ranks, his approach methodical and unwavering. Each kill was precise, leaving no trace beyond the dwindling number of soldiers who began to sense an unease spreading through their lines. With each silent dispatch, he could feel their collective tension rising, as though some primal instinct warned them of the predator among them. He used that fear to his advantage, amplifying their paranoia. A brief flash of movement, a footstep in the dark, a shadow passing between trees. Each tactic heightened their dread, driving them to mistake one another as threats, weakening their focus. It was a psychological assault as much as a physical one. And it was working. When a group of soldiers finally discovered a body, their discipline began to fracture. They sounded a quiet alarm, gathering in small clusters, backs pressed together as they scanned the forest with wide, anxious eyes. The Boogeyman watched, waiting for his moment to strike. With a well-placed shot from a stolen plasma weapon, he took down another soldier, the blast sending the remaining aliens into chaos. They began to fire wildly into the darkness, the hum of their weapons filling the air, their beams lighting up the trees as they desperately searched for their invisible foe. In the chaos, he moved in, emerging from behind a fallen tree to launch himself into the fray. His movements were quick, calculated, and brutal, the product of years spent mastering the art of close-quarters combat. He met the first soldier with a crushing blow, disarming him and using his own weapon to dispatch the others in quick succession. Alien blood stained the ground, a stark reminder that they were no longer the hunters but the hunted. The remaining soldiers, realizing they were up against an opponent unlike any they had faced, attempted to regroup. Their leader, a hulking alien with a jagged scar across his face, barked commands in their guttural tongue, rallying them into a tighter formation. But the Boogeyman anticipated their every move, pressing forward with relentless force, adapting his tactics to dismantle their defenses. He circled them, using the trees as cover, creating the illusion of multiple attackers closing in. With each strike, he grew bolder, exploiting their weaknesses, slipping through their defenses with lethal efficiency. The soldiers fought back with desperation, their weapons lighting up the night. But the Boogeyman was faster, his reflexes honed to a lethal edge. He was not bound by their rigid tactics. He was fluid, elusive, and deadly. Finally, only the scarred leader remained, his face twisted in defiance and fear. The The boogeyman stepped forward, his gaze cold, as he approached the alien who had rallied the troops. In a final surge of defiance, the leader charged, weapon raised, roaring in fury. But the boogeyman sidestepped smoothly, his movements a blur, and with a swift strike, he disarmed the leader, sending the weapon clattering to the ground. For a moment, they stood face to face, the boogeyman's human form stark against the alien's towering figure. Yet it was the boogeyman who radiated danger, his eyes piercing, his body poised with unbreakable resolve. Without a word, he delivered a blow that dropped the alien leader to his knees, his strength broken, his fear evident. The boogeyman finished him with a quiet finality, marking the end of the soldier's resistance. The boogeyman approached the alien prince's stronghold with unwavering resolve. Set high on a rocky cliff, the fortress loomed like an ominous testament to the Empire's might. Alien symbols, etched in a language unknown to Earth, glowed faintly along the metallic walls, casting a dim light across the barren landscape. This was the heart of his enemy's domain, and within its walls waited the one who had unleashed ruin upon his life. The path leading to the fortress was littered with traps and guard stations, each manned by soldiers bristling with advanced weaponry. But the boogeyman moved with precision, slipping past guards and disabling traps with the quiet efficiency of a seasoned predator. His recent assault on the prince's soldiers had only heightened his focus. He was a sharpened weapon, honed by grief and vengeance, and there would be no stopping him now. Inside the fortress, the air was thick with tension. The alien prince, a towering figure draped in dark, ceremonial armor, awaited his arrival in a grand hall lined with statues of his ancestors. His skin, a deep shade of indigo, shimmered in the low light, and his eyes, cold, calculating, held a sinister gleam. Though his face was calm, there was a flicker of unease beneath his composed exterior. Word of the boogeyman's assault had reached him, and though he'd never encountered a human who posed any real threat, he knew better than to underestimate an enemy driven by revenge. The boogeyman entered the hall, his steps echoing against the polished metal floor, his figure a stark silhouette against the alien grandeur. The prince regarded him with a disdainful smirk, speaking in a tongue thick with contempt and authority. The boogeyman could not understand the words, but the message was clear. He was seen as little more than an annoyance, a pest that had dared to strike back. Undeterred, the boogeyman moved closer, every muscle poised for the fight to come. The prince raised his arm, gesturing for his remaining guards to step back, a show of arrogance and overconfidence. He wanted this confrontation to be personal, a final display of his power over the human he believed was beneath him. He leveled his weapon, a staff-like device brimming with crackling energy, at the boogeyman, a mocking challenge in his gaze. The boogeyman answered in kind, his movements swift and calculated. In an instant he lunged, dodging the prince's first attack with a fluidity born of years in the shadows. Their weapons clashed, a blinding burst of sparks lighting up the hall. The prince was strong, each blow powerful and calculated, but he was unprepared for the boogeyman's agility, for the brutal efficiency with which he fought. Blow after blow, they exchanged strikes, a deadly dance of strength and cunning. The prince's weapon hummed with lethal energy, slicing through the air with deadly precision. But the boogeyman was relentless, slipping past each attack, landing strikes with relentless accuracy. He moved like a storm, adapting to each shift in the prince's tactics, unyielding, each hit fueled by the memory of his lost companion. Frustration flashed across the prince's face as he realized that this human would not fall so easily. The boogeyman's strikes grew fiercer, targeting the weaknesses in the prince's armor, exploiting every vulnerability he could find. Each blow weakened the prince's defenses, chipping away at the veneer of invincibility he'd once commanded. In a final desperate move, the prince activated a hidden reserve of power, flooding his armor with energy, making him glow with a blinding, electric blue aura. He attacked with renewed fury, the floor vibrating beneath the force of his strikes, walls trembling from the impact. But the boogeyman was undeterred. This was the moment he had waited for, the crescendo of his journey. He met the prince's attack head-on, deflecting the deadly strikes with skill and precision until, in a swift, calculated maneuver, he struck a critical blow. The prince staggered, his weapon clattering to the ground, his armor sparking, cracked, and failing. He dropped to one knee, his gaze now one of fury and disbelief as he looked up at the human who had bested him. The boogeyman approached, his expression resolute, every step measured, his purpose unshakable. He knew this was the end, a reckoning that would bring closure not just for himself, but for the memory of his loyal friend. The boogeyman held the prince's gaze for a moment, a silent promise that the life taken would not be forgotten. With a swift final strike, he ended the prince's life, the body slumping forward, the weight of his empire collapsing with him. The room fell silent, the hum of alien machinery quieting as if in respect for the fallen. He stood there a moment, breathing heavily, the reality settling over him. The prince was gone, and with him, the shadow that had loomed over his life since that terrible night. In the stillness, he felt the faintest sense of peace, a release from the relentless drive that had brought him to the heart of an alien empire. Without a word, he turned and left the grand hall, stepping through the remains of the fortress. The battle was over, but his journey would continue. There would be others, perhaps, who sought to test Earth's defenses, to lay claim to a world they did not understand. But the boogeyman had made one thing clear. Earth would not be conquered easily, and those who dared to threaten it would face a force as relentless as they had. As he disappeared into the night, the fortress behind him smoldering in ruin, he felt the quiet presence of his lost companion beside him, as though, in some way, he had honored that memory with every step. His vengeance had been exacted, and though the scars remained, he was free to carry forward, a guardian in the shadows, forever marked by a story that would not soon be forgotten.